building today. Thank you for joining us. Dr. Williams is going to come right back in and do my fave, which is culturally responsive.
Yeah, you know, it's sustainable now, culturally sustaining, it's all changed everything.
Culturally, when I was in school under Dr. Hilliard, it was culturally relevant pedagogy. That's what I remember it as. Same difference, you know, it has different reasons why people call it responsiveness. Definitely I would love to hear your perspective after this presentation. Just from the conversations that you last had, I cannot wait to dig in deep with you all throughout this school year. So definitely take note, definitely take note, because this is something you definitely will need as you work throughout, as you serve throughout this year.
All right, so we're going to build on the conversations we've already had today. And so the idea now is, we're squeezing a lot. I mean, we usually take a semester to teach all this stuff. We're doing it in 3 hours. But now, since y'all talked about some of these big issues, social justice issues, equity issues in schooling, what do you do? How do you do it? What do you do in the classroom that's different, that's important? And so we're going to talk about culturally responsive, they use culturally relevant, now it's culturally sustaining pedagogy. How many of you are familiar with this at all? Know anything about it at all? A couple people? One? Okay. The words, what do the words mean? We're going to just take it apart. What do those 3 words mean?
Well, responsive,
Okay.
and that word applies to the ability to adjust automatically to different settings.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Is that close?
So you
Because I know it from technology, I don't want to make sure.
No, I mean, you want to be able to adapt, you want to be able to change,
Yes, adapt.
but in response to what?
In this case, different cultures of people, and I would say political correctness in a sense, having that respect of different cultures and being able to adjust that. I might be one way with my peoples, but with another group of people or even a mixed group of people, I have to be able to adjust to that, not do certain things or go the extra mile to make sure what I say is not offensive.
Like code switching.
What was that?
Code switching.
Code switching.
That's what it's called. Yeah.
I'm from
Yeah,
Florida.
like
We don't have-
adapting,
We don't
yeah.
have manners in Florida, so I don't know the word.
Oh my gosh, you generalize your whole state.
You gotta count them all.
That's funny. Okay, so you're getting some of the pieces there. And then the people that we're talking about, you say people,
Urban students.
yeah, we're talking about our kids, for the most part, right, children. What are some of these other pieces up there? What are those other words up there mean?
Pedagogy.
Pedagogy, what is pedagogy?
Dang, I just can give examples of
Okay.
pedagogy. I don't know the definition. It's really, okay, this is what I think, right? So, from what I've learned, African pedagogy specifically, it was just, it's like the breakdown of like a community, but it's like the way that you teach. At least from what I learned from, oh my gosh, what's his name? I can't think of it. He came to guest speak one time. Chika, yes, Chika, who's also a teacher, and he talked about African pedagogy, and he broke down about like the Ankh, like how it represents like that community and the general history of it too. Also, the way that you teach multiplication, that's another. It's like different ways of teaching, but that's just one section of pedagogy for the education. That's about all I can think
Okay.
of. That's tricky.
Pedagogy.
My guess for what pedagogy would be is the method or practice of teaching, especially as it came to me.
I hate you. Oh, so that was pretty
Technology
good.
is amazing.
Right.
Let me see it. I want to see it. I think
It's fine, don't drop it.
the method of practice. Yeah. Okay. Cool. I don't know how to say that in words. But examples.
So pedagogy is about teaching and learning. It's the practice or the art and the study of teaching and learning. How you do it, how you do it well. What does it mean to teach? What does it mean to learn? So it's that work. So people that are pedagogists or, be a teacher, pedagogist, somebody who understands how to teach, how to learn. How does that word culture really? What is culture?
Related to a person's values, their beliefs, who they are as a person.
Yeah, so your values, your beliefs, what's important to you, how you do things, right? It's culture. So, anybody else want to add to that definition? Culture. What is culture? You know what culture is? I mean, you know it when you see it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is it? Give me an example.
It's the way groups of people do things.
Okay.
And that's based off of race or even country. For example, South Florida, full of culture. You've got Haitian groups, you've got Hispanic groups, and even in that, it varies. There's no one set culture. Because in Cuba, they've got white Cubans, black Cubans, and then mulattoes, everybody in between. And they have differences racially, but they share a lot of the same religious beliefs. Catholicism, manners, when people come to your house, you do feed them, that sort of stuff.
So, and I mean, I think an important piece of that, you said, it's shared.
Yeah.
Right? So, it's not something you as an individual walk around, this is my culture. I mean, generally it's shared with other people, and it's learned. Yeah, it's learned. So we're going to talk about culturally responsive pedagogy. So put those three words together. What do you think that means? Culturally responsive pedagogy. Yeah.
All right. So, okay. Culture relating to others. So, relating, responsive, actively, pedagogy with kids to teach them education. Anybody feel me on that?
I get you. I'm with you. I'm
Like,
with you.
okay, like basically like actively relating to the kids and like teaching them whatever they need to learn based on their culture or other cultures.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm with you.
I wasn't breathing just then. I was not just
Right.
breathing.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, keep breathing.
So yeah, that's basically it. Now, now we define it. The thing is, how do you do it? That's the hard part.
Research.
Right? We'll talk about some research. So let's get into it then. What is culture? What is culture? Right? It's shared. It's organization of ideas, your intellectual ideas, moral, aesthetic standards, right? So you think about your culture. Oftentimes, the things that we talk about that we as examples of culture are really just scratching the surface. I mean, your culture goes to the root of who you are, the way that you live in the world. Standards for deciding what is, what can be, how one feels about it, what to do about it, and it's dynamic. I mean, culture shifts and changes. It moves with us. It's in some ways, it feels like it's almost alive, your culture. And sometimes it's hard to put your finger on it, exactly what is your culture, because there's so many things that make up probably your culture. It cuts across just race. So when we talk about culture, people like to just connect it to race, but it's far more than just race. In fact, I would challenge anybody to define a culture just by race. So to say, define black culture, or white culture, or Latino culture. That's very, very challenging to do, because oftentimes these other pieces that we don't think about. You think you can do it, you smile. You think you can do it?
I was thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, but black culture to me is more, I guess, black to me is based on race, because I feel like I'm a black person, because I'm African ancestry.
Right.
So even Brazilians, there's black people over there.
That's
Like
right.
you said, there are black Cubans. So that's how I can define and separate it. But that doesn't mean we all have the same culture, but we might have similarities. We might use it and sometimes connect us,
Right.
or religion.
That's right. So you can find those connecting points.
Yeah.
But then there'll be points that are very, very different.
Yeah.
Right? So you think about the components of culture, there's all these different pieces, right? There's the way you communicate, right? There's, and that's nonverbal and verbal communication. Like for instance, Ebonics, I think is a really nice, any of you familiar with Ebonics? You know about Ebonics? Black vernacular, some people say black vernacular, black dialect, right? Well, there's research out there that says, Ebonics is actually a language rooted in a cultural group, right? And so, that's another lecture for another day.
Yeah.
That's a fun one right there.
I just have like a quick question.
Well, I believe Ebonics is a language.
I do
Why-
too.
Okay, and excuse me if this does sound biased, like why, I've heard people that were in that generation of learning Ebonics, they didn't like Ebonics. For the half that wouldn't like it, why didn't they like it? Like, does anybody know?
Because they were told that it was not the right way to speak.
Yeah.
Right.
And so the question you're asking, remember we talked about earlier today, to make sure that you always pay attention to the system,
Yeah.
right? So here's something that was created out of primarily the black community. I mean, there's, Ebonics comes from a lot. So here's something that's created primarily out of the black community. Given where black people at the time, or even today, were positioned in America, how valuable do you think Ebonics would be?
Today?
Today or then? Today or then?
I don't really know. I still don't really know.
So I'll ask the question again. Think about the system,
Okay.
and think about race in America.
It's a good thing, right?
What, race?
Oh no, your question. It's like a good thing today, right? Yeah, it's valuable today.
Black people.
Ebonics.
So it depends on who you're talking to. It depends on who you're talking to. I mean,
Okay, yeah.
everything is valuable in certain contexts. I mean, it depends on who we're talking to, right?
Yeah.
There's certain things that my, kids I teach 18 and younger value that I don't even understand. I didn't understand, but it's valuable to them, right? So it depends on who is valuable, who we're talking about. But if you're talking about Ebonics, remember, so this was something that came out of a group of people that were not valued in this country. Because of that reason, that language was not valued. Now, if I'm a smart parent, and I want my child to be successful, then I try to get them to understand and to speak like the people that are successful. Right? It's the same reason that we see Spanish-speaking parents telling their children, don't speak Spanish, learn to speak English. Because they understand, that Spanish is not going to get you anywhere. English will get you somewhere, so learn English. It doesn't mean that Spanish isn't valuable. It just means in this system, what's the language of power is English. And so learn English.
And is Ebonics a mix of? I'll Google it.
Yeah, I'll come back.
Okay.
We'll talk about
it's
Ebonics. It's a great conversation.
Yeah.
But your values, your behaviors, your perspectives, your world, the identity, the way you see yourself, the way you think, even the way you think about the world is rooted in your culture. So if you can imagine, if you're teaching in a classroom and all this stuff is going on with each child in your classroom, and all you want to do is teach. I was like, I just want to teach. But you've got to think about all these pieces. You really have to. Other places that you learn your culture from, we talk about church organized events with people in your community. Schools, right? You learn a lot about culture, maybe not your culture, but you learn about culture. In fact, one of the things people say when we talk about the purpose of school, remember I asked that question this morning, what's the purpose of school? One of the purposes of school is culturalization. Teaching you about culture and how to be, how to work, right? Share. Remember, how many of you had to deal with that? I had to deal with that in kindergarten. Learning to share. Right? That's a cultural experience, sharing. Right? Everybody doesn't look at sharing and property the same way. So you learn what our values are around sharing. Child rearing practices. What's the relationship between the parents and the child? How do you show respect? What is respect in the community? Elders and their place in the community. All this is culture. All of it's rooted in culture. So if you're thinking about an individual, like I said, we tend to think about race. But look at all these other pieces that could be connected to your culture, your gender, your ability, religion, where you're from, your region, ethnicity, social class. All these things could be rolled into your culture. We tend to reduce it to race. So much more. So much more. Yeah. So much more. So much more. Let me give you some examples. I'll give you some examples. So when we talk about American culture, this is what American culture. We would say American culture. Tends to be what we think about with American culture, right? So, Puritan morality, right? Thrift, duty, respectability, right? Work ethic. Harder you work, right? What do we say in this? Time is what?
Money.
Time is money. It's all about working. How much you work, how hard you work, right? You have that hard work ethic. Individualism, right? I did this. If you're successful, it's because you did something to make yourself successful. It's about your individual work, self-reliance. Don't step on my individual rights, right? That's something that's very big here in the United States, right? Achievement orientation. You set a goal, you meet that goal, what do? You set a higher goal, right? We can never say, oh yeah, cool, I'm here. This is good enough.
It's never
Right?
good enough.
It's never good enough. We always set a higher goal. We're going to keep going, keep going. Future time orientation, you sacrifice for today for tomorrow. You put money away, you save money, right? Equality of opportunity, everybody gets a fair chance. Now that's in the scribe. We say that. Even though in some ways it's not true, we say that that's a value of ours. We value honesty, openness in the economic structure. If you're poor today, you can be rich tomorrow, right? Everybody can move up and down. That's why we love to talk about Oprah, right? Because Oprah started on the bottom.
How's she here?
Now she's here.
Oprah. Let me see.
Y'all didn't know about that, did you? And sociability, right? Connecting with other people, living in communities, being a good neighbor, right? This is kind of American culture. Would you agree with that?
I agree.
Would you say that tends to be American
it's
culture?
broad.
Mainstream. Now,
But I
right,
agree, yeah.
It's right. It's what
It's
others
very
would
broad
think of
because
that.
what within this are all types of subgroups and subcultures, which may not think about life this
Yeah.
way, right? So, for instance, individualism. There are a lot of groups that struggle with that. That say it's not just about individual achievement; it's about group achievement too. You know. So here, let me give you some norms for other groups inside the United States. So this is interesting, right? Conversation and communication styles, right? Everybody doesn't do this the same way, and we see it in schools, right? And a nice example is talk story, Hawaiian talk story. So in traditional American culture, if you're having a conversation with somebody, and you all are doing it right now, you're being very polite. What do you do, right? I'm talking, what are you doing?
Listening.
You're listening, and you are doing what? You're waiting
Yeah.
till I stop talking, and then what are you gonna do?
I'm gonna talk.
You're gonna talk, and then what am I gonna do?
You gonna talk?
I'm gonna listen.
Oh, I'm
And
sorry.
then we're gonna go back and forth, right? We're gonna go back and forth in that style. I'm gonna listen while you're talking, and you're gonna listen while I'm talking, right? Hawaiian talk story is very different, right? It's, you almost talk over each other.
Yeah.
Right? It just kind of flows, right? Because the idea is, and this happens in my cultural group as well, is that you don't wait for the other person to finish talking because they said something, and now it's time for me to respond to it. Now, if I wait,
You gonna forget it.
then I'll forget it. I'll miss the opportunity. So the conversation kind of talk over each other. So there's no waiting. So if you think about it in a classroom, when you raise your hand, imagine a child who Hawaiian talk story is the way they communicate. And I've got to raise my hand, talk, put my hand down, wait. It just doesn't work. I'm bouncing in. So these are children, you see them bouncing in their chairs. They just want to say something, but I got to keep waiting for my, and so it doesn't fit. There's a cultural disconnect. Storytelling, right? To tell a good story in traditional American culture, right? The story has a beginning, middle, and an end. Think about the Three Little Pigs. There's a beginning, middle, and end. And it's fairly linear, right? A lot of black children tell a story, and it goes kind of like, so my mama and I, we went to the supermarket on Saturday morning. And while we were at the supermarket, we were looking at the frozen food, and I saw Mr. Washington. Now, Mr. Washington, he goes to our church. Our church is over on 10th Street, and every Sunday morning, we got to wake up early, and now we're at church. It's like, how did we get to church? We were just in the grocery store. But somehow that child will go all over here and get back to the grocery store. So it's not linear. It's not linear storytelling. It's very non-linear. But it's an interesting story. That linear storytelling is kind of boring. Right? And so the idea is that style of communication is very rooted in the culture. Collectivism. The idea is not about individual achievement, it's about the group. Nepalese children, children from Nepali, right? From Nepal. There's a belief that if I know something, then you know something. Right? If I know how to multiply two-digit numbers, then you do too. Because you know what? I'm going to teach you. I'm going to show you. Right? It's about collective responsibility, right? So these kids, I have a buddy who was doing research. These kids kept getting in trouble in school for cheating on tests. Because they'd be sitting taking a test, and their neighbor would be sitting there, and they noticed that their neighbor was struggling with the problem. And what would they do?
Help.
They would help them. Because that's what my culture tells me I'm supposed to do. They would go and help them, and they would get in trouble for cheating. There's a disconnect. Eating meals and collectivism, right? So I taught in Ethiopia for a little while. Anybody like Ethiopian, eat Ethiopian? Ever eaten Ethiopian food?
Yeah.
Okay. You have? Have you eaten authentic Ethiopian food? Like
An Ethiopian person made it.
did you eat on injera?
No, I ain't doing
Oh, I had general.
Injera,
Yeah.
okay. So in Ethiopia, the way that you eat your food is they put it on a plate. There's a plate, a big plate in the middle of it, and then they put a bread called injera on the plate, and then they put all the food on the plate. And then so what you do is, oh, well, let me show you. Here's what it looks like.
Yes. Oh,
Heard about that.
So that's the injera. You see the little roll? This is the bread right here. That's the injera and all the food there. And it's actually, all the food is actually sitting on injera. So what you do is you take your hand, your right hand, because your left hand, no, it's your dirty hand.
Yeah.
It's a hand you use for other things,
Okay.
right? This is our clean hand. So if you shake hands with your dirty hand, that's very Right, so this is your clean hand. So you take a piece of injera, you tear it off with you grab the food and you put it in your mouth.
Oh, yeah, I did.
And then, once you put it in your mouth, you grab another piece of injera. Now, we would struggle with that in this country.
Very much so.
Right? Because you double dipping, first of all.
Yeah.
I just saw you put your fingers in your mouth, then you put them back on the injera.
When I saw the picture, I was like, I hope they watch that.
Yeah.
My culture.
It's
you
around
know.
the time.
Wash your hands. Yeah, you put everything, you put it in your mouth, right?
Very different.
But it's very different. It's a very different style of eating,
Yeah.
right? And to ask for your own plate,
It's rude.
it's kind of rude. It means you don't want to eat with us. You don't want to eat with us. So while I was teaching there, I had to learn to eat this way. Because, you know, my culture says, no, I want my own plate of food, my own injera, but they're very different. Respect and eye contact, right? My father used to say, look at me when I'm talking to you, right? Look at me when I'm talking to you. There are cultures that for a child to look an adult in the eye is a form of disrespect. It's saying to that adult, I see you as an equal, so I can look at you in the eye. So there'll be children who, out of respect for an elder, turn away when somebody's speaking with them. They're being respectful. But in school, we tell a child, look at me in the eye. So now we're demanding that a child do something that they've been taught culturally just not to do. Just not to do. So you can see how these things will create issues in a classroom. Time. Polychronic and monochronic versus monochronic time. Right? Monochronic time says the movie starts at 10 o'clock. You need to be in your seat at what time? 9:45, right? Because that movie is going to start at 10 o'clock. Monochronic time. Theory, right? Polychronic time says the dance recital starts at 8 o'clock. We're going to show up about 8:15, 8:20. It may start at 8:30. You know about this, Kristen?
Yes.
I know you do.
More like 10. It won't be over yet.
Right? So monochronic versus polychronic time is this idea of how we deal with time. And in fact, it's very, very rooted in culture. Think about this. If you live in a culture where the seasons change dramatically, right? That means you've got to plant when it's time to plant. You've got to harvest when it's time to harvest. If you don't, you will die. Right? You've got to pay attention to time. Now, if you live in a culture where it's warm most of the year, you can plant anytime you want to, harvest anytime you want to, you do it when you need food. Oh, we're running out of food. We need to go plant and harvest and get more food. So you don't worry about the seasons, you're worrying about need. Here's an example. My wife is Tanzanian. And so this is a bus from Tanzania. So she tells the story of the buses in Tanzania wouldn't leave on time. There was no schedule for the buses in Tanzania. The buses left when? When they were full, right? They're very good. That makes sense, right? So why leave at 1 o'clock if there are only 2 people on the bus? We leave when the bus is full, right? So polychronic versus monochronic time. And so you see this still in certain people's cultures where things kind of start when we're ready for them to start, as opposed to them starting when we said they want to start.
So polychronic is kind of like what you would say colored people time. You know?
I was going to say,
Asian-
that's what you all probably understand. Yeah, and but it makes sense. It makes sense, right? And so I got my advisor in college, my advisor in grad school said that in America, you all are on time. In Africa, we are in time. And it's very different. Very, very different.
That's telling you. I like that.
Right? But we put values on certain things depending on context. Okay, here we go. Here's another one. Context, high and low context cultures, right? Low context cultures, everything's written out. There's a sign everywhere. Here's the restroom, turn here, stop here. There's signage everywhere. High context cultures, not as much sign. You gotta kind of get your cues from the way things are kind of set up, right? America, which would you say, well, what are we?
High content.
Medium.
High.
We are like
low.
Low context. We got signs everywhere. We got signs everywhere.
That's what.
It depends on
There's
where.
no like Georgia State sign. Have you ever noticed that? You know, like Georgia Tech has like Georgia Tech, like you can take a picture in front of it.
Right.
Georgia State doesn't have a sign.
They're around.
You ever-
Yeah.
You don't see them?
Yeah,
That's
they're all
because the
over.
building are dispersed.
Look up.
Signs
That's what I'm
are in the
saying. They're
building.
up, like
I
they're
mean,
not
like on a
the.
street pole or things
Yeah,
like
they're
that.
like not on the ground.
Yeah.
Like you know, like this is
Oh,
super
yeah.
straight. Like
You need like a main one.
a main one.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
it.
that's-
Yeah,
we
isn't
don't
that
have
cool?
here.
I was trying to take a picture by it one time and I looked around the whole
But
city.
that's where, but it's everywhere. It's everywhere right
And we're so used to them, we don't even see
still
them
have
anymore.
At
Yeah.
least like in the
The
states
little
or the
circle.
Panther.
So imagine if you are from a culture where it is very low context. Like you're used to seeing signs everywhere, right? And you've got somebody in your community that is not used to looking for signs for things, right? So they come in and they're like, okay, well, where's the restroom? Where's the restroom? And so we say, well, don't you see the signs right there? The signs right there. And so, but it's just this disconnect in culture. Just two different ways of doing culture. Personal space.
Oh,
That's
my
always good.
gosh.
That's always good. Give me 4 volunteers. 4 volunteers. 1, 2, 3. I need one more. One more.
Go on, do it.
Come on. She volunteered.
Trying something new.
All right. So, I want you to stand here. You're gonna face this way. And I want you to stand right next to him, face this way. And I want you to stand here. And you're gonna stand right next to him, right there. All right, so what I'm gonna ask is in just a little while, I'm gonna ask you guys to take a step forward. Okay. And I'm gonna ask you how comfortable you are with them being as close to you as they are. We'll get to a point where you'll say, I'm not comfortable. I won't ask you to say. Okay. Right, when you're not comfortable. All right, so take a step forward. How's that?
Okay.
You all right with that?
Yeah.
Cool with that?
Yeah.
All right, take a step forward. How you feeling? Still all right with that?
Yeah.
Cool?
I'm in flight mode.
You're in flight mode? Maybe? Maybe?
You want a different guy?
All right, take a step forward. How you feeling? Cool?
I feel better here actually than that awkward one right before.
Right before
Yeah,
that
that was
little
a weird one.
And how about you? How you feeling?
I'm okay for now.
For now? But you know I'm gonna ask, right?
He's gonna get a little closer, Andy.
Right. Let me ask you, if I ask him to take a step forward, you think you're gonna be all right?
I'm gonna be like this.
Yeah.
I
How
like
about
my
you?
space.
So,
That's a
so,
valid point.
I can turn to the side
so
and I'll
you're even, I know you stepped backwards when you
It's
stepped
like-
forward again. How should I do it? So, and you're steadily moving further and further back. Take little baby steps back. Do you want me to take a step forward?
I can, and only if I turn side.
Oh.
Yeah, because I don't mind somebody next to me. That's like, I'm in my own zone this way.
Dr. Williams.
Yeah, like the elevator.
I speculate that this is also gender-based.
That's a good question. So if there were
Yeah,
two
I
next
don't
to you,
think so. No, me neither.
Because what I mean by that is, had it been the other
Yeah.
way, I think they could get closer before we flight as guys than the other way. And I just mean that on a neutral level.
okay. All right. Okay, that may be true. There's maybe some power dynamics going on there. But you all are pretty much, that's about as close you want them to get,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So in the United States, in our culture, personal space is about an arm's length away. It's about an arm's length away. Any closer than that, and we become very uncomfortable. Thank you, understand. So, about an arm's length away is what we're comfortable with. Now here's Japan.
No.
Oh God.
Yeah, Japan is the best.
Train
in Japan. Never.
Have you seen
You're
that
on train?
video?
So this is
Never.
a train in Japan. This is a train in Japan. Now here's what I want you to notice, right? So there are a bunch of people lined up waiting to get on the train, and there's a bunch of people on the train, and they're not, they don't have that arm length. You see that, right? Their arm length is gone. Now these guys here, their job
You have to push people to make room.
is to push them.
Like literally, like lean this
Literally.
way and push them in.
That's, you see, that's what they're
Never.
doing. They're squeezing people on the train. So think about it. Why does this make sense? So culturally, if you're in a community, if you grew up in a city or a nation where there's space, there's not a lot of people, not as many people, you can say an arm's length. You can be kind of greedy with our personal space. There's a lot of space I can take up there. But if you're in a country where there are far more people, right? You can't be all like, I'm gonna take all this space. We need to move people on this train. And so we're gonna cram people so you can't have the same type of personal space. And so culturally, a person coming from a culture like this might just get up right up in your face and talk to you this way. Like, what is family? So does family need to be blood?
No.
You got family that's not blood? Who has family that's not blood?
They call them kinfolk.
Kinfolk. What are kinfolk?
It's people who are not in your family but are close enough that you trust them as a family member.
Okay, you got people like that. But you all realize that is very cultural. To say that your family extends beyond blood. I got people in my family that I call my aunts, my aunties, my uncles that are not blood. They're just people that are just I call them cousins, right? And then once again, also the idea of family extended beyond your mom, dad, your sisters and brothers, right? Your second and third cousins. Here's another example. Oh, okay, I want to do this. So in talking about physical contact, right? Holding hands. So this is an interesting story. So these are two men walking together, right? And this is in Ethiopia once again. And this is the way they walk down the street. Right? In our culture, in the United States, what would be the assumption about these two men? They're homosexual, right? These are homosexual, right? They're gay. So when I was in Ethiopia, I remember walking with a friend. We're walking down the street, and he reached down as we're walking, he grabbed my hand, and we started walking down the street. And my cultural alarms and bells going on, right? But there I talked about context. Here, in this context, for a man to put his arm around another man or hold another man's hand is actually a symbol of friendship. Right? I'm close to this person, right? I'm close to this person. Now, two women can do that in this country. It's acceptable for two women to walk hand in hand in this country. But for two men to do this, it would be looked at as but here it's about context. It's about context. So once I'm just kind of going through examples of the way that culture plays with us sometimes. So these are just some examples, but we go on and on and on. And you can see all these things make it into a school, will come into a school. Not only that, you bring your own culture into that school as a teacher. So you got to think through, if I have assumptions about the way the world works and my students have different assumptions, is that going to interfere or impact the way that I'm attempting to teach or how well they learn with me? So one of the things culture responsive pedagogy says for you as teachers is to really, really examine all your norms, your beliefs, your values, the way that you see and think the world works. And that's kind of what, so this Sonia Nieto kind of talks about this. Sonia Nieto is another researcher. She does a lot of work with language. Brilliant, brilliant researcher. So she says, expectations are not connected with the biases we have learned to internalize. Having good intentions or even caring deeply about students is not enough. We need to consider our biases, which even the most enlightened teachers carry with them every day that we step into their classroom. So if you are taking ideas into the classroom about your students or about what is right in the world, what's valuable, what's important, then it's going to influence the way that you teach your children or don't teach your children. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? So when we're talking about culturally responsive pedagogy, what we're asking you all to do is to think through that piece, how culture plays out in a classroom. And there are lots of ways to do it. I'm going to talk about two. One is called multicultural education, one is called culturally responsive pedagogy. Multicultural education, if you think about it, probably was the roots for things like culturally responsive pedagogy. It's where it kind of may have come from. I mean, there are other areas. African-centered education informed this, critical theory, all these things, but multicultural education is probably like the great-great-grandfather. Or grandmother, great-great-grandmother. James Banks is the guy who oftentimes we talk about. Other people did it before James Banks. Other people were talking about this. But if you read, James Banks is the person that we tend to think about. And James Banks had 4 ways of thinking about integrating culture into a curriculum or into a school setting. 4 different ways to do it. And you all have probably seen some of these ways because we do them all the time in schools. All right? So the contributions approach, the additive approach, the transformation approach, and the social action approach to education. Okay, I'll go through each of them. Contributions approach is food, festivals, and holidays. We love this type of culture in the classroom, right?
Yeah.
Right, so it's February, so we pull out the picture of George Washington Carver and blow the dust off, stick it on the wall, and say, hey, we're celebrating black scientists.
Perfect picture.
Right?
Blows it off.
You know, right? Blow the dust off.
Same poster from
And then on the 28th, we put it back in the box. So, right?
Not even on the first.
Right. February's over. So, the contributions approach just kind of says, look, we're not going to really shift the way that we talk about culture in this classroom. We're not going to create spaces for seeing the world differently, for other world views, other values. What we will do is every once in a while, I'll talk about somebody else's culture. It's not really important in here. It's not really included in here. I'm just going to talk about, I'm going to talk about a dreidel, right? And that's the way I'm going to incorporate Jewish culture. We'll go eat sushi. I'll bring some sushi or taco night. We do a lot of taco night. I was at a school and they were doing black culture and they did, I swear.
No, they did. Fried chicken?
Yes.
They did what?
Was it from Popeyes though? Like,
I don't know where.
Make it at home?
I was just hurt.
oh no.
I was just hurt. Because I think that there's so much more they could have done. So much more they could have done.
Fried chicken.
We have like authentic African food that ties over into our culture in
Right.
America.
There's some, we could have talked about domestication of crops from Africa that were brought to the Americas. There's so many things we could have done. But we did fried chicken. I don't know if it did not have watermelon. That was the only thing. The totem pole. But I mean, if you all think about schools, this tends to be the way that we integrate culture. We say we're integrating culture. And really, kids walk out going, oh, that was really great, George Washington Carver, but he's really not a part of my life. That's somebody else's.
That's true.
Right? Okay, so this is the contributions approach. Now, let me say this. Even though you may hear me talking about this as a hierarchy, I'd rather somebody did the contributions approach than nothing at all. So it's a step.
Yeah.
It's a step. This is a one way of doing it. Okay? Yeah, Cinco de Mayo, which is, what do we say Cinco de Mayo is? Mexican Independence Day?
And it's totally not.
Not the truth.
Yeah.
No.
That's not the day when they gained their independence?
No.
Ain't that crazy?
I don't say that.
Cinco de Mayo. What is
It's
Cinco
about
de
the
Mayo?
war. It's a war in the
The end
border
of the war.
of, it's representing the end of the, not French and Indian, or maybe. I think it's the end, possibly.
Somebody-
Yeah, I think it's the,
American?
yeah.
I'm not sure. I'll have to
It's
look
when
it
this
up.
split.
But it's not,
Mexico.
it's not Mexican Independence Day.
No.
And it's, I mean, I'm
But
laughing
America.
because.
So Mexicans did not gain their independence on May 5th.
No, it's celebrating the end of the war.
And I'll look it up. The additive approach is you incorporate some concepts, some content, some perspectives. The overall curriculum stays the same. The overall culture of the school stays the same. But we're just going to add some things in to the curriculum. So it's taking the contributions approach just a step further. So the way we talk about Thanksgiving is a really nice example of this, right? Thanksgiving was a meeting between who?
The Indians and the Native Americans, again, the Pilgrims.
Native Americans are the Pilgrims. Great. Tell me about the Pilgrims.
They needed a lot of help.
I mean, who were they? How they get here? What's going on?
When they came
Colonizing.
here, they tried to colonize and they would not survive. Because
Okay,
they
so-
didn't know how to use
Yeah,
the
they wouldn't.
resources around them. They stole and pillaged, right? You know the story goes.
Right.
And took-
Where did they come from? You said they came from someplace. Where did they come from?
Europe.
They came from England. What language do they speak?
English.
English. What
European.
race?
White.
They're white. How they dress?
Was a lot of clothes.
Square buckles.
And it
Square
did make
buckles,
sense.
that black, the shoes,
And the toe covering.
with the buckles on the shoes and everything. Were did they marry? How did they structure family?
They married, husband, wife.
Husband and wives? They have children? Oh, that's great. Tell me about Native Americans.
Oh.
I think they're.
Yeah.
I'll be like they're better. But say that like
Where did they come from?
that's their land.
I wanna say
Their own
America,
land.
they come from America.
Well, don't they come from someplace else
Actually,
too?
Oh, how about this?
I was-
Let's just start with the easy one, right?
Okay.
What was the name of the people? So Native Americans are a whole lot different.
Yeah,
Cherokee,
Can't
Iroquois.
Are we on Cherokee?
No, so who are they?
Aren't they Cherokee?
No.
Chickasaw?
No.
What part of, wait, here,
I
what
used
part
to
of the
know
country
that
were
they-
they from?
Right.
They were Northern.
Virginia.
That was in
Virginia?
And they're not Cherokee, huh?
What language did they speak?
Georgia.
I used to know this.
The people?
The savage.
Here's my point, Why is it that you all know so much about the Pilgrims?
Because we live in America.
Nothing at all about the Native people.
Because we live in America.
Because we live in America.
Because that's what we were
They
talking
are
That's what you were
American.
talking
They
about.
put
Like,
that in our books for years and years.
That's right.
I did have a teacher teach us the name. Like, she actually was on a test. She actually taught us the name and the language that they use.
Iroquois.
But it's been so long that I've used it and no
That's
one's
probably
asked me
what
about
it
it,
is.
so I've forgotten.
And because it's not really talked about during
It's not talked
Thanksgiving, we
about.
don't talk about it, right? And here's the thing, is that generally, when I go to schools and I see them celebrating Thanksgiving, they have kids dress up as pilgrims and they have the hat
Yeah.
on, right? And how do kids dress up as Native Americans?
With
What do we do?
feather, the brown.
With
We
the
put a-
axe.
we put a feather.
Like, axes
We
and
put a feather,
violent.
little headband with a feather,
Yeah.
right? Is that the way they dress?
No.
We don't even know. So here's the thing, once again, so we're talking about a group of people, we're really not going deep, we're not changing the conversation, we're just kind of adding Native Americans in. Really haven't changed the curriculum at all, we're just adding Native Americans in. Does this make sense? The Native American people were the Wampanoag, is the way I think that it's pronounced, Wampanoag. They were from
That's north.
the area of Boston, Massachusetts.
Okay.
In that area, that's New England, they didn't dress with a feather in their head. They probably wore a whole lot more clothing because the area of the country they lived in was very cold. The Plains Indians are the native people that we tend to see, like the Lakota, were the ones that tend to wear the cloth and the feathers and things like that. It's very, very different. So the thing is, we've reduced First Nations in this country to a stereotype, right? Because they're really not important. But if we were changing the curriculum, really wanted to change the curriculum, we would talk about perspective. We would talk about, we really go deep about Native people. We go deep about the Pilgrims, and we talk about both sides of it. We were really trying to shift the curriculum. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So now the question is, when November rolls around and you all are in schools, what are you going to do about Thanksgiving?
I'm gonna teach my kids
Celebrate
about
my
the
birthday.
Just ignore it. Just ignore it.
what's the group called? The
What's- Wampanoag.
Wampanoag. Okay, I'm just saying it like that so I can type it right. Wampa?
W-A or
Wampanoag.
O-M-P-A-N-O-H-E. Okay. Transformation approach. Transformation approach is saying now we're actually going to take the curriculum and we're going to change it. We're actually going to talk about perspectives of different people and different cultures. They're going to have a place in the classroom. It's not going to be something we just add in. It's going to actually have a place in the classroom. So during World War II, you all know this story, right? The internment camps, the concentration camps that we set up for Japanese citizens
Yes.
in the United States, right? So we jailed and took the land of Japanese people in California. Yeah, this is later. This is World War II. And because we were fighting Japan, we assumed that citizens in this country who were also Japanese, we needed to fear them. And so we took them, we moved to the Midwest, we put them in internment camps. Similar to what we saw in Germany. That we were fighting against at the time. Do y'all understand that?
Yeah.
So, if we're going to talk about World War II, right, we're going to talk about this, have this conversation, then we need to talk about this. We need to take about the perspectives of American citizens being held captive in their own land.
Yeah.
Right? We need to have those conversations. So that's really a transformational curriculum. Right? That helps our kids really to understand the world they live in. Whether they're black, Japanese, or white, whatever, you know. they need to understand this entire story, not just one side of it. And then social justice approach, social action approach says, okay, great. We helped our kids to kind of understand the world. Now help them to change it. Anybody ever see the movie Mississippi Burning? Remember Mississippi Burning? It's about the students that were coming down to Mississippi to register people to vote, and the cops pulled them to the side of the road, walked up to this car and shot them and murdered them. Okay? It's a true story. It actually happened. Well, that's the kind of work that Bob Moses was doing. He's a civil rights leader. In fact, I've heard rumors that Bob Moses was supposed to be in that car that night. That went down. Bob Moses is also a mathematician. So for you all, it's really important. Here's a mathematician also doing civil rights, and he combines the two. So he looks at mathematics as a civil rights issue. He says if kids don't have access to civil rights, it's almost like not letting people vote. You need to learn mathematics. So he started a program called the Algebra Project, national program, which is helping kids to learn mathematics, but then use it to solve problems in their community. So it's not just learning mathematics, it's learning mathematics for a reason and helping them to solve problems in their community. It's called the Algebra Project. The other one, this other photograph is from Tucson, Arizona, when they started an ethnic studies program for Latino children. Right? So the idea was that Latino children were going through a school system that didn't teach them anything about their roots, their heritage, their culture. And so Tucson, Arizona schools started an ethnic studies program for Latino students. Graduation rates went up, dropout rates went down, right? Grades came up. They killed the program. They stopped the program. They shut it down. Because people from the governor's office and some other people said that it was anti-American. It was creating dissent between Latino students because they were learning about the roots of oppression with Latino people in America, and they felt that was, so they shut the program down. The students, these are the students here. The students marched. They organized and marched. That's powerful. You have students marching for school, saying we want to be educated. We want access to this information. So you should read about that. That was really, it happened about 2 years back. And it was really, I was very, very proud to see our students doing this, because oftentimes we see our kids don't care about education, and here kids marching for education.
And in Tucson, the demographics is mainly Latino, and because they're right next to the Mexican border, it's right there. So a lot of the demographics are Latino, so it would be smart of them to keep it, but it's sad that it's not there when most of the population is Latino. Yeah.
And not only did they shut the program down, there were a bunch of books that the kids had been reading. They not banned the books, but they limited their access to them. So at one point in time, each kid had a copy of these books. What they did was they actually said, okay, well, we're not going to give each kid a copy of the books. They went to class and they actually confiscated and took the books. And they said, we'll put a copy of the book in the library for you. So instead of every kid having access to the book now every kid has access to going and borrowing it in the library. So, just things to think about, the is and isn't of multicultural education, what it is, what it isn't. It's not about everyone, it's not kumbaya. So culturally responsive pedagogy is not kumbaya, that's not what it is. I mean, sometimes we have to have very hard, difficult conversations when we're teaching this way. That conversation about how can you talk about Thanksgiving without talking about what happened to Native people after Thanksgiving? Right, that's a hard conversation. So it's not kumbaya, right? People also like to say, well, it's only about social studies and language arts and things like that. It's much broader than that. When I come and talk to you all about science, there are some things that went on in science, right? That around inequities and oppression that we should have really deep conversations about. And we need to do that as well. So it's comprehensive. It should happen. We should be thinking about this in every subject areas. They say it's a process of watering down the curriculum, and really it's making the curriculum more relevant, more real. More engaging, more accurate. It's related only to reform, only to education reform. But if you teach this way, you're talking about teaching this way with everything. It's about assessment. It's about leadership in your school. It's about planning. It's everything. The school itself has to take on this type of attitude if you want to teach this way. It's only for teachers and students of color. That's not true. Like Black History Month is not about just for black people, right? That's our country's history at the end of the day, right? And everybody needs access to that information. It's achieved through a series of small changes, and in actuality, it's about transforming the school and the curriculum. All right? So as you all think about this, and you go into schools and you're thinking about doing this type of work with your students, one of the things you got to figure out how to do is if you're in a school where this is not the way it's done, what will you do? How will you operate in that school? How will you operate in that classroom? Are you going to try to just carve out a little space? You may have to do some building with other teachers and try to build connections with other people so that you can actually change the culture of the school. It's hard to do this kind of work in a bubble. It isn't modeled through cultural bulletin boards, assemblies, and fairs. So taco night is not going to cut it, right? It really is about you reflecting, you thinking about your ideas, your belief, and self-examination. It's community building. What's that?
So if you're working with like little ones,
Yep.
you maybe would start with the left, but build at the end goal on the right.
Well,
Like
so
what you ask them, I guess.
right, and so here's the thing: is that the cultural bulletin board as a piece of something larger,
Mm-hmm.
right, is fine. But most people just want to do the bulletin boards,
Yeah.
Right,
Oh,
and fairs.
oh, I see what you mean.
right? It's not enough.
Yeah.
It's not enough. Right? It's not enough. In high school, we love to root this stuff in clubs, like we'll have the Black Education Club or the Latino Education Club. And really, it's the responsibility of teachers and the people in the community to really make this thing happen. And it can't be done in a single workshop, right? It's changing you, it's changing the way that things are done in the school. It's an ongoing commitment. So that's multicultural education. Is that clear? Does that make sense to everybody? As you think about going, how about questions? You have questions, concerns? Yeah.
For it to be an, oh, never mind.
What were you thinking?
I was gonna ask, like, how can you make it an ongoing commitment of cultures, but I guess you could make it an ongoing thing about consistently learning about new cultures. Like, I think I answered that.
And also remember that part of it is also, so part of this work is also rooted in the idea that one of the reasons that we see certain children not doing well in school is because schools are set up really for certain kids.
Yeah, I remember I actually used that to talk to that. I think that was you, yeah, that was talking about. Yes, it was you. I'm sorry. I was in the car. I was actually giving my friend advice. She's in the STEM program, I think.
Yeah.
And she was like, they just don't want to learn. And I was like, well, actually, if they look around the room, this is an example he gave me, y'all. Like, they look around the room, like there's not a lot of faces that they can relate to,
That's right.
and that's why they're not able to like connect with what they're learning sometimes. And I always tell people that too, and we use it in classrooms.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we need to
Finding
figure out how to
a
do is how do we make our classrooms accessible to children
Yeah.
when schools work. So when the Brown decision happened, and we desegregated our schools, it's not like we all sat down and said, now how are we going to change our schools so that they really meet the needs of all these kids that are now coming to these schools? What we did actually was we dismissed a lot of the educators that were working in the segregated black schools that knew a lot about educating black children. We said, you're fired. We got rid of them. And then we took the children and we moved them into a school that was never really meant to meet their needs in the first place. We never ever thought through how do we create a school system for this new group of kids.
Right.
That's a problem. And so now we're facing that problem. And we've done it around the country. We dealt it with kids from First Nations, we did it with Latino kids, Spanish people. We're still doing it. We very rarely shift the school. What we do is we try to shift the child. Make the child get in line and do better in the school. Does that make sense? Yeah. So this is multicultural education. This is what you'll hear people talking about. Culturally responsive pedagogy, talk about it. We've got a little bit of time. I want to get to the meat of it. Okay. So this is basically culturally responsive pedagogy, right? A framework that respects the background and contemporary circumstances of all learners, regardless of individual status and power, and employs learning processes that embrace the range of needs, interests, and orientations to be found among them. So there's a couple words that you see there that you didn't see in multicultural education, things like power and status, right? So culturally responsive pedagogy is also kind of looking at how schools serve to replicate what's already happening in our society. So if we've got kids coming from a poor community, schools in some ways are just routing kids back into that poor community. And so the question is, as an educator now, how do you help to break that cycle? How do you help kids to prepare themselves for the world that they're going to live in? This is what cultural responsive pedagogy. Gloria Ladson Billings is the person that we tend to talk about when we talk about culturally responsive pedagogy. She's the big scholar. There are others. It's been around for a very long time. And the book that you can read if you're really interested in going deeper is The Dream Keepers. If you'd like to learn more about culturally responsive pedagogy and how Ladson Billings kind of got to where, got to this idea, the book is The Dream Keepers. It's a great book. It's a quick read, easy read, but it's really, really interesting. So what she's saying is, how can you use the culture that children bring into the classroom with them to help them to learn? That's the basis of culturally responsive pedagogy. Let's go back. I talked about this already. This is a nice little cartoon. Linus says to, you all know about peanuts, right? I always got to ask these days because I don't know how my age is getting in the way. I'm using examples that y'all, I do not know who those people are. So Linus says, our teacher has an interesting theory. She says teaching is like bowling. All you can do is roll the ball down the middle and hope you touch most of the students. And Charlie Brown says, she must be a terrible bowler.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Right? And so, in some ways, this is the way that schools are organized. You have the mainstream, and we're just going to try to get them. If we miss you, too bad. And so a lot of kids are really falling through the cracks. And the fact of the matter is, we don't talk about, we're not even talking about this bowling example as an individual school. This is the system of education. So even in Atlanta public schools, where the majority of children are not white, we still teach as if the majority of students are white. We still teach a mainstream curriculum that doesn't really connect with these kids, their culture, their history, their values, and their beliefs. And so we're not doing a very good job of educating children. So something for you all to think about is, how can you make sure that you are actually touching the children that you are attempting to teach, right? That you're connecting. It would be unfair to assert that teachers are fully responsible for such racial inequality in education, or that they are solely responsible for correcting it. However, we do know that teachers participate in the reproduction of racial inequality, and that teachers can mitigate or exacerbate the racist effects of schooling for their students of color, depending on their pedagogical orientation. So depending on what you all do in school, things are going to get better or going to get worse. That's basically what it's saying. We're not going to blame teachers. We're not going to say it's all on teachers' shoulders. But remember what I said, the teachers' curriculum this morning? You're a big part of this. A big part of this. So let's talk about culturally responsive pedagogy. I'm going to push through this. I want to get through here. These are the pieces of culturally responsive pedagogy. This is what Ladson Billings says, cultural competence. Your kids need to be able to come into that classroom and know that who they are is valued, and they got to be able to walk out of that classroom knowing that who they were when they stepped in is who they are when they step out in terms of their culture and their values and their beliefs. It can't be that you step into the classroom as a Spanish-speaking child from Cuba who understands his very rich history and values the Cuban culture, and you step out and you've lost all of that. You step out as this American mainstream, right? The idea is cultural competence in their own culture, but also in the mainstream culture. You want them to be the shift. Academic achievement, your kids got to learn. So you can't say that you are a culturally responsive pedagogist if your kids aren't learning. They got to learn. Your kids have to learn. And then socio-political consciousness. Your kids have to be critical. They got to think about Thanksgiving in a critical way. They can't just think about the Pilgrims and not think about the Native people as well. So in order to be a culturally responsive pedagogist or a culturally responsive teacher, you've got to do all three of these things. That's a lot to ask. That's a lot. How many you agree?
Yeah.
You ready?
It takes work. Like it takes real work.
It does. It takes work, and it takes a lot of reflection.
Yeah.
You as a teacher.
Yeah.
Right? You've got to, so, for instance, one of the things I hear people say all the time, poor parents don't care about education. I hear or I hear black parents don't care about education. I hear that all the time. Right? And I'll always ask, well, how do you know that? How do you know that? Well, they never come to parent-teacher night. They never come to parent-teacher meetings. And I'll say, well, when do you have them? Well, we have it after school. It's like, well, if they're working, they can't come to the parent. And they never thought about that. They never thought through the fact that there's a good reason that they didn't come to parent-teacher conferences, that they do care about education, because that's the myth. And oftentimes we're just looking for evidence to support that. Right? So if you're not reflective, if you're not thinking about why you believe what you believe, you'll take things into the school and you'll actually end up hurting kids and communities. Okay, I'm gonna jump past this stuff here. I'll come back another day, we'll talk about it another day. I wanna go to this stuff here. All right, so if you're a culturally responsive pedagogist, if you're thinking about teaching this way, this is the two things so there's ways to teach that are culturally relevant, that help kids to be culturally competent, critically conscious, and academically excellent. And there are things that are going to make them they're assimilationists. In other words, do you remember the brick in the wall? We don't need just another brick in the wall. That's the brick in the wall, marching, faceless, right? So culturally relevant people say that knowledge is continuously recreated, recycled, shared, that students can teach the teacher just as much as the teacher can teach the student. And that's the way it is in the classroom. So you'll have these folks that are listening to their kids. I want to hear your voice. I want to hear your questions. I want to hear your ideas. Right? Well, the simulationists say it's just static. The teacher passes knowledge to the student. You pour it in. It's not like you open the head up, pour the knowledge. Right? So, and that's the way, if you think about schools today, that tends to be the way we teach in schools today. We just open the head and pour the knowledge in. Knowledge is viewed critically, right? We need to question. A kid, those who work in schools, have you ever had a kid raise their hand and ask a question that pushes back on what you said is right? Right? Or they're challenging you in the classroom? Teachers, a lot of teachers don't like those kids. You're messing up my curriculum. I didn't, like I said, I want kids in the classroom that raised their hand and said, well, weren't the Native American people here when Columbus got here? How did he discover America?
Well, what does native mean?
Well, yeah, what does native mean? Right,
Doesn't that mean?
Right, right, exactly.
Yeah.
First. Right, exactly. That's what we want to respond.
I will.
We'll get back to that.
I like that.
We'll get back to that. Yeah, but you want kids to think critically.
Yeah.
You want them to question.
Yeah.
Right? Assimilationist teachers will say, this is the way it is, I don't need for you to question anything. And in an assimilationist classroom, you don't get kids asking questions. Culturally responsive classroom, you get lots and lots of questions from the kids. Culturally relevant teachers are very passionate about the content. They get into it. They live in it. Assimilation teachers are detached, neutral about the content. It's like, I don't care why this curriculum says I got to teach you about photosynthesis, so we're going to learn about photosynthesis. As opposed to somebody saying, look, we're going to garden. We're going to go out and garden and learn to grow plants, and we're going to learn about photosynthesis. We're going to get into it. They're passionate about it. Teachers help students develop necessary skills, as opposed to expecting your kids to come in knowing the skills that they need to be successful in their classroom. Teacher sees excellence as a standard that kids are just going to have to. We got a lot of different ways of becoming excellent in this classroom. A lot of this diverse classroom, got a lot of ways of getting there, right? The idea with the assimilation teachers, there's certain kids that are capable of being excellent. There's certain kids that are just not. You teach in the middle, not to every child. So that's just knowledge. So that's the way you think about knowledge. When you think about others, when you think about yourself as a culturally responsive pedagogist, seeing yourself as an artist. Artists, I've never met an artist that says I've mastered my art.
Never.
Right? They're always trying to get better, So a teacher as an artist is somebody who's constantly trying to get better as a teacher. Technician says, you know what? I just got to go through the motions, do this, do that, do this, and I'll be a good teacher, right? As opposed to studying your art and studying your craft. Culturally relevant teachers see themselves as a part of the community. They may go into the community and learn about their kids, learn about where they come from. They may go shop in the same supermarket. They're trying to understand not only their kids, but the community they come from, and they see themselves as an active member of that community. They see themselves as a part of that. Assimilationists see themselves as, that's their community, that's them over there, this is me over here. And they see themselves as detached. In some ways, they try to get away from the community after school is over. They hop in their car and get as far away as they can. Right? Culturally relevant teachers say that all students can learn. All students can learn. In fact, all my students will be successful. You hear them say that. All my students will learn. right? Where assimilation teachers say, look, it's a bell curve. Have you all heard this? I've heard it drives me crazy. It's a bell curve. And you got kids on either end. You got kids in the middle that are going to succeed, but you know, on either end, you got kids that are going to fail. That's just the way it is. That's just the way it works, right? Or you'll go into schools and it'll have a big sign that says, School of Excellence,
Yeah.
70% meets or exceeds. Y'all been in these schools? And I always go, how is it a school of excellence?
Right.
30% of your kids are failing.
That's what I always thought.
How's
Even
that a
in
school of
elementary
excellence?
school, I was like, but you guys forgot my friends. You know?
Yeah.
Like, I never understood how it's like, always like, we're the best school, but then like, we got kids acting out and like crazy stuff. Like,
That are failing. And it's all right if you're in the 70%, but if you're in the 30, that's too bad for you.
Yeah.
are you going?
That's a huge number. That's right.
Oh, yeah.
Teachers help students make connections between their community and what they're learning. Teachers say, you know what? This is what's valued here. Assimilate and be a part of this. I don't care about what you do in your community. I don't care about where you speak in your. So you use Spanish at home. That's fine. Here we speak English, and that's what's valued here. Teacher sees teaching as pulling knowledge out. Kids come into the classroom with all types of knowledge. They know so much. Pull the knowledge out as opposed to pouring the knowledge in. Just dumping the knowledge in. Okay, which is breaking education. All right, last one is social relationships. It's how they actually connect with other people in their classrooms, right? Culturally relevant teachers. The relationship between the students is fluid, it's equitable. Students have power in the classroom. So a culturally responsive teacher will come into the classroom and say, let's come up with the class rules as a community. Let's decide how we're going to treat each other in this classroom. And then as a community, they come up with the class rules, right? In a assimilationist classroom, they say, I'm the teacher, I make the rules in this classroom. And then they list out the rules. And the kids have no voice in the rules. I mean, I think that you can even get to a point where you say, I'm the teacher, here are my 3 rules for me that I need in this classroom. What things do you need as students? And ask the list. But students should have some voice in the classroom, right? So that relationship. Culturally relevant teachers connect with their students. All of them. Not just the ones that smell good, the ones that dress nice, the ones that look like them. Connect with all students. Assimilation teachers tend to connect with teachers that are like them, that they like, that they connect with. Culturally relevant, it's about a community of learners, people helping each other, people learning from each other, with each other, as opposed to competitive competition and learning again, who got the highest grade, who did the best, right, as opposed to competition. And then culturally relevant, they say, let's learn together. Let's teach each other, let's work together, let's do group work, let's try to do this together, as opposed to learning individually. So I just wanted to give you some examples about the way this would look in a classroom if you were trying to be a culturally responsive pedagogy, in terms of the way that you see yourself, the way that you see the content that you're teaching, and the way that you see your students. Yeah.
How do, now this might be just for me, because I'm a part of APS. I feel I came from the right side. How do I be a cultural relevant teacher when I've been on the right side my whole life in the education system? How do I break that mode?
Could I add to that question as well?
Sure.
Because I come from where the student body is the right side. And you have a teacher who's trying to be the left side. So also, how do you do that if we're in that position where the class is right? How do we begin to pull from that?
Because I want to be the left side. A lot of the things I'm hearing, I'm like, oh, I want to do that. I want to do that from personal experience.
Right.
But how do I pull it out?
So you go way back today to where I said, what's the purpose of education, right? And you need to answer that question for yourself. Why are you in this classroom? Why are you doing this work? And if your work really is saying, look, I want to really value my children. I want them to feel cared for. I want them to feel like I care about where they came from and I'm preparing them for tomorrow. Then it's very hard to be that assimilationist teacher and to really say that you're going to achieve that goal, that purpose of education. Because if you think about it, everything on the right side, did you enjoy it? when you were in school? You probably hated going to school.
I mean, I loved going to school. My mom used to say, you really like going to school, and I did, because I had some teachers that were kind of on the left side.
The left side.
But you still had that right side, like you said, the student body, you still have a majority of them on the right side. So it's kind of like you had those few teachers on the left side that made it where you want to go to school.
Right. And you, like you said, they were from closer to the left side,
Yeah.
right? So they were doing it. And they made school bearable and enjoyable for you, right? So what I would do if I were you is I would go back to those teachers and the way that you felt in their classroom. And think about the learning experience that you had in their classroom. Did you learn more? Did you learn better? You know, and try to emulate those experiences for your kids now. Try to build those same experiences for your kids. Because at the end of the day, I think you know what the problem is that in some ways, we've been conditioned. That this is the way that school is, right? Like, I'm the teacher in this classroom. I gotta take charge, or these kids will run over me. I hear you say it all the time. And part of me says, well, no. If your classroom is a really wonderful place to learn, you have no management issues. If your instruction is the best management tool you'll ever have, if you have engaging, interesting instruction, your kids will come into the classroom every day, sit down, put their books away, sit there, and sit there ready to learn. But if this right side, if you have content that's irrelevant, that's unimportant, your kids don't feel cared for, then they're gonna, remember the video? They're gonna start turning over a desk. You're gonna have problems in the classroom. And so what I would suggest is just think about, what do you want for your kids? What do you really, really want to create in your classroom? And I think what you'll find is that over and over again, you find yourself on that left-hand side. And then what you're gonna have to do is whenever you find yourself slipping, because that's what you've been conditioned to do, is to remind yourself, no, I really, really, really want to create a classroom that does these things over here. And it's gonna take thought. It's like exercise, right? It's if you want to get healthy, you don't do it by doing all the stuff you were doing before. You oftentimes you have to change, and that takes energy, and it takes forethought, and it takes reflection. So what I'm telling you all about is probably not very easy to do. It's very challenging.
And can I chime in? It's going to be even more challenging because you all are teacher assistants, and you all will be finding teachers that are very much so on the right side. And the training that you're going to be getting is you will have no choice if you care, but to try to stick with the left side. But the best thing for you to do is to just take the moments that you do have with your students in whatever you're doing and capitalize on that. And I think the most important thing that Dr. William had in the presentation was it's small changes. No, you're not going to be able to probably go in there and do a revamped Thanksgiving celebration day. You probably might, you never know, but you probably won't have that opportunity. But you can take that 5 to 7 students and do those things with them. You can create a creed that just you and your students say to each other that's very relatable to them. You can do a fact every time, a fact moment, did you know type of moment every time you meet with your students, just to teach them history. You never know. You could do an interest inventory just to pull out what are your students' interests, and you can use those things during your small group activity. You don't have to think, well, this is the lesson plan, let me stick with it. Yes, stick with the content, but make sure you bring in what you're getting from this training, what you're bringing from your life, and then do those things. So yes, it will be difficult. What the trainings you'll get from Dr. Williams and myself are teacher trainings. We do teacher trainings. Teacher assistant training is a bit difficult because you don't have your classroom. But during dreams and sometime, you all will be able to exercise those muscles that you're getting. And then just think about it, those who are in a steam truck, those who are at towers, you will build that rapport and you will find the moments. There is a moment at any point in time throughout the day where you can embed this cultural relevancy that we're talking about.
And I think that the other thing to think about is that a lot of our teachers that we have in our schools want to be great teachers. I really believe that. I love teachers, and I think they want to be great teachers. I think one of the things you all can possibly do is if there are opportunities for you all to add things in, oftentimes you'll find teachers that go, you know what, that's really great. Oh, and they'll go with you on it. You have to find those opportunities. But I don't get the impression. I mean, there are some teachers that are out there that are like that. I don't want to hear it. I don't talk to me about it. But more often than not, you'll find teachers that are very open to exploring new ideas and doing new things with their kids. Really, if they feel like, because I think a lot of teachers would like to be on the left. They want to do that type of teaching. And if they feel like you're doing those types of things for their kids, they'll go with you. It's all in the way that you're going to deliver it. Is it prepared?
Prepared.
You can't come in there and ask them to do a whole lot of work, because they already got a lot on them. You're going to have to do a lot of it yourself. And you come in and say, look what I prepared. I'd like to do this with the kids. And, you know, and I remember, yes, my son goes to a school that AmeriCorps was at last year. He came home with reports, and I'm sitting there going, where? Like, they did something on
Money, was it capitalism?
money and capitalism
was out.
and growing coffee beans, and where do you buy your coffee beans from, and fair trade, and it was amazing. But it was something that an AmeriCorps student had put together and brought it into the classroom, and the teacher went along with it. And it was beautiful, it was amazing.
At another site, a young lady realized that the girls related to negative images in magazines, TV. She just heard the girls say, you know, well, I don't like this or that about me. And she went to the director of that school. It was a small private school, and she allowed her to have a self-esteem day. So she bought all type of activities for the girls to do. I think she ended up doing like this makeover thing, and you know, where the girls wear their hair out, just take all the bows off, and you know, just let them wear their hair out and compliment them all day. So that's kind of the ways that you can do. And just like you said, it's how you bring it. You don't want to come in as if, you know, they're not doing the right thing. I'm coming in to tell you these wonderful things that Georgia State is telling me about. You definitely don't want that. That's the last thing you want to do.
The wrong way to do it.
The wrong way to do it. But you want, if you come in and say, I have a 30-minute lesson that addresses the standards that you are doing this week, and I planned it out, and here it is, they'll go, oh, okay, and they'll allow you to do it. Because all they really want is that good support.
They do. They want their kids to learn.
Yes.
They really, really do. And the other thing I'll say to you all is, as you reflect and think about these things, remember that these teachers are also, they need space to reflect as well. And so I know that you all are all very transcendent and, you know, progressive and forward-thinking people. But just like you had time to think about those things, right? Give them time and space to also get here as well, you know, as you are on your journey. In other words, you can't roll into the classroom talking about, I noticed you ain't talking about the woman, no ad. So you need to create space for people to grow. Really give people space to grow. At the same time, you're also going to have to dig really deep about the things that you need to work on in yourself. And the hard part about that is that oftentimes those things are invisible to you. You don't know what they are until you start to rub up against them. I'll give you an example. So I had a young person who went through my program and just felt like she was just, I'm just ahead of everybody else in terms of this culturally responsive stuff. And so we got on a conversation about homosexuality and, you know, LGBTQI, right? And the idea that we are pretty heteronormative in elementary school. And she said to me, well, why would you talk about LGBTQ in elementary school? There's no place for that in elementary school.
Every time she did projects was for people to look, for the students to look at the history of whomever they're talking about, their food, their dress, all of that, and how it relates. One, go back to its root, which usually was Africa, and then how it relates to them now. And so the great way she did that, and talking about African American foods, was to show how in mainstream dishes, there were many things that were, like you said, harvested on the continent that you see in the dishes and how they did it, exactly how they prepared it on the continent. And that will be a way you're really legitimately acknowledging what's African American, the history of it. Because soul food is not the history of that start. I mean, like you said, it has a lot to do with what they prepared with what they had, kind of thing, which is why it was so unhealthy for a long time. But even if you did do soul food, it's New Age African Americans
they have found healthier ways to do it. They switch it up. They call it different names to the soul food, in different regions. What I think up top or in the Midwest, they eat spaghetti with fish on the side. Yes, I'm Chicago. I had a Chicago friend. They had spaghetti. She had fish with
Spaghetti
spaghetti on the side. I was
spaghetti
like,
and
what?
barbecue.
You can't
Yes,
eat fish
or
without spaghetti.
You can't eat it.
You
That's what
can't
they
eat fish
say.
without spaghetti?
Right.
Yeah, you
That's
can.
the
Yeah,
savage.
but that's real. Like stuff like that would be a better conversation than, oh yeah, let's just have fried chicken and macaroni and cheese. No, what do you eat with spaghetti? We never ate fish with spaghetti. But my homegirl from Chicago, she was like, what? We're not eating spaghetti without fish. But some people eat cheese with grits, and some people like, no, put sugar in it. Yeah, like, or, gumbo. Some people think only New Orleans is gumbo. How they do. So, it just various ways that sometimes students can't relate to that whole go all the way. They feel like that's just disconnected. But they can relate to auntie cooking fish with spaghetti and mama saying, nah, we don't eat like that. We eat the spaghetti with this. Or, that's our main dish. That's not the main dish. That's a side dish. Or, we put ranch in our potato salad. Or, I don't know. Just random stuff that you can do.
But it's not just the food, it's the conversation that you have around why this is happening. And there's so many different things you could do with that. But I think what they were doing was just kind of food folks and food festivals and holidays. Here's some fried chicken, now you know about Africa.
Oh, wow. That's hurtful.
We should protest. Let us.
So just don't put on your team wear picture when you protest.
That's illegal.
Pull that AmeriCorps thing up. Well, thank you, Dr. Williams, for spending the day with us.
Well, I'll see you tomorrow morning.